I never thought a train ride would change my life, but here I am, sitting on this polished wooden bench, heart pounding because of a guy who's just asked me to join him in the staff car. Let me rewind a bit, because that sounds way more dramatic than it felt at the time. So, I was on this luxury train trip, something I booked kind of on a whim after a brutal few months at work. I needed a break, and the idea of slowly rolling across the countryside, no phone, no emails, just vintage charm and endless views was exactly what I needed. The kind of trip where you imagine old-school elegance, clinking glasses, and people dressed up like it's the roaring 20s. I'm not even exaggerating. This train had it all. Polished brass, plush velvet seats, a dining car that looked like a fancy restaurant. And, of course, staff in crisp uniforms, moving around like they owned the place. I'm sitting in the observation carriage, staring out at the green hills sliding past when I first noticed him. He was one of the luggage porters, the guys who get on and off at every stop, handling the fancy trunks and designer bags with this quiet, practiced ease. Tall, lean, with dark hair that was slightly tousled like he'd just run his hands through it a second before I saw him. He moved with that kind of effortless confidence that makes you think he's seen and handled a lot more than just suitcases and bags. Our eyes met for a second, and he gave me this small, almost shy grin before disappearing down the corridor. I'm not exactly a smooth guy when it comes to meeting new people, especially someone who looks like they stepped out of a movie. But something about him stuck with me. There was this calmness, a sort of groundedness, that I really needed after the chaos of my life back home. Later, after dinner, I was wandering the train trying to burn off some nervous energy. That's when I bumped into him again. Not literally, thankfully, and we started talking. He introduced himself as Marco. He'd been working on luxury trains for a few years, moving from city to city, living a life that sounded fascinatingly unpredictable. He told me about the little routines the staff had, the hidden spots on the train where they could catch a break, and how the job was more than just lifting bags. It was about being part of something special. I was honestly surprised by how easy it was to talk to him, how natural it felt. We shared a few laughs, some stories about travel mishaps, and before I knew it, the train had slowed down for a quick stop. He glanced over his shoulder and, with that same shy smile, asked, "Want to see where the magic really happens? Come with me to the staff car." I hesitated for a second. Part of me was thinking, who does this guy think he is? And the other was screaming, yes, absolutely. Don't mess this up. So I nodded, and he led me down the narrow hallways, past glimmering brass fixtures, and into a little compartment that felt like a world away from the luxury cars. And that's where I'm sitting now, wondering how a simple train trip turned into something I didn't see coming at all. Because sometimes, the most unexpected invitations can open the door to something unforgettable. The staff car was nothing like the polished, ornate passenger cars. It was cozy, almost claustrophobic, with chipped paint on the walls and a small window looking out onto the tracks. A worn couch sat against one wall, and a tiny kitchenette took up a corner, cluttered with mugs and half-empty snack bags. It wasn't glamorous at all, but somehow it felt real, like the behind-the-scenes version of the luxurious world we'd just come from. Marco shut the door quietly behind us and leaned back against the wall, watching me with that easy smile. "Not exactly the Ritz," he joked, tapping the armrest of the couch, "but it's where we all catch our breath between stops." I sank down onto the couch, suddenly nervous in a way I hadn't expected. There was something about being here with him, away from the polished facades and the eyes of other passengers. Like the masks we both wore were slipping just a little. "So what made you want to get on this train ride?" Marco asked, his tone casual but curious. I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but I could feel my heart still racing. "Honestly, I just needed a break. Life was getting messy. Work was stressful, my social life was basically non-existent, and I figured I'd treat myself to something different. You know, pretend I'm in a movie or something." He laughed softly, the sound low and easy. "Fair enough, I get that. For me, it was just a job at first. I needed money, and these luxury trains pay better than most gigs I could find. But it's grown into something more. There's a rhythm to this life. even if it's not the most conventional. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It's crazy how different the world looks from inside. I mean, I've traveled a lot, but seeing it all from this train, with you and the staff, it's like stepping into another life. He caught my gaze and held it for a beat longer than necessary. Maybe that's why you're here, he said quietly. Not just to escape, but to find something new. My throat tightened. I wasn't sure if he was reading me or just making conversation, but either way, it struck a chord. Suddenly, the train rattled slightly, reminding us that we were still moving, still ticking away on this endless track. Marco stood up and stretched, then motioned toward the tiny window. "Come here, look." I got up and joined him, peering out at the darkening landscape. The sun was dipping low, casting orange and pink hues over rolling hills and sleepy towns. The view was gorgeous, but it was the moment, the quiet between us, that made my chest feel tight. "You want to hear something weird?" Marco said, glancing at me with a half grin. "Hit me." This might sound crazy, but sometimes, when I'm alone back here, I imagine what it'd be like to actually live on this train. Like, not just working on it, but call it home. Weird, right? I laughed, shaking my head. Not at all. There's something kind of romantic about it. A constant journey, new places every day, no routes, just moments. He looked at me, his expression softer now. Exactly. And sometimes, I think about finding someone to share it with, someone who gets it. There was a pause, filled only by the train's steady hum and the distant whistle blowing somewhere ahead. My heart was pounding again, faster this time, and I wasn't sure if it was the thrill of the moment or something else. "I could get used to that," I said, surprising myself with how honest I sounded. Marco's smile deepened, a little shy, a little hopeful. "Maybe you should stick around and see if you like this life, and me." I took a breath and looked at him properly for the first time, noticing the way his eyes caught the last light of the day, the small scar on his wrist I hadn't spotted before, the way his smile made my world feel a little less heavy. "Yeah," I said quietly, "maybe I will." At that moment, the door to the staff car creaked open, and one of the other porters peeked in, breaking the bubble we'd built. Marco stepped back toward the door, glancing at me once more. "Don't be a stranger," he said as he opened it wider. "There's a whole world back here if you want to explore it." I nodded, watching him disappear down the corridor. The train felt different now, more alive, full of possibility. I sank back onto the couch, heart still racing but filled with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And just like that, what started as a simple train trip was turning into one hell of a ride. After Marco disappeared down the narrow hallway, I stayed in the staff car a little longer, letting the quiet soak in. The sounds of the train, the rhythmic clatter on the tracks, the soft creak of the car flexing as it moved, felt different here, more intimate somehow. I kept turning over what he'd said about finding someone to share this life with. It sounded almost too real, like a glimpse into something deeper beneath all the polished surfaces. Eventually, I got up, stretched, and decided to wander back toward the passenger cars. The evening was settling around us like a soft blanket, and the windows were glowing with the fading light. I found myself passing the dining car, where a few couples were finishing dessert, glasses clinking softly. The whole place looked like it belonged in a movie. Elegance and old-world charm everywhere, but I couldn't shake the pull of that small, unvarnished staff car and the guy who worked back there. The next day, I kept running into Marco during stops and on the narrow corridors. He had always flashed that easy smile, and sometimes he'd sneak in a quick word or ask how I was enjoying the trip. I found myself looking for him, even though part of me wondered if this was just a temporary thing, a kind of fleeting spark in a setting built for fleeting moments. At one of the longer stops, we ended up outside near the platform, where the air was cool and fresh. The sun was high, and there was a bustle of staff loading luggage and supplies, the clatter and chatter creating a background hum. Marco was working, lugging a large leather suitcase onto the train, but when he caught sight of me, he waved me over. "Want to grab a quick coffee? Off the clock," he said, nodding toward a little kiosk near the station. I hesitated for half a second before nodding, and we walked over together. The coffee was nothing fancy, just a small cup from a burner, but it somehow tasted better shared. We found a bench in the shade, and for a while we just talked. No polished charm or practiced smiles, Just two guys sharing stories. Marco told me about growing up in a small town with dreams bigger than the place could hold, about the freedom and loneliness of life on the rails. I shared some of my own story, the burnout, the feeling of being stuck, why I'd booked this trip in the first place. There was a vulnerability in that conversation I wasn't expecting, and I could feel it settling between us like a quiet understanding. At one point, Marco reached out and bumped my shoulder lightly. "You know," he said, "I don't usually do this. Invite passengers back here, I mean. But there's something about you. Maybe it's the way you look at the world, or how you don't seem scared to be a little lost. I get that." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me. "I'm glad you asked me. I think I needed someone to remind me that getting lost can be the start of something." We sat there a little longer, letting the noise of the station fade into the background. When it was time to board, we walked back together, side by side, the train waiting like an old friend. That night, I found myself wandering toward the staff car again, the memory of that easy connection pulling me in. When I knocked lightly, Marco opened the door with that same half-shy smile. "Back so soon?" he teased. I shrugged, stepping inside. "Can't help it. Feels like home here, in a strange way." He motioned to the couch. "Sit. I want to show you something." He disappeared for a moment and came back with a small photo album, worn at the edges, filled with snapshots from past trips, the staff and candid moments, distant landscapes caught through train windows, little notes scribbled beside pictures. As he flipped through, he told stories about the people he'd met, the places that had changed him, the rare moments of real connection in a life that often felt transient. I could see how much this life meant to him beyond the surface. And sitting there with this album between us, I realized I wanted to be part of that story. The conversation drifted naturally into pauses and quiet smiles, and before I knew it, Marco was sitting closer on the couch, his knee brushing mine. Neither of us said anything, but the air between us shifted, electric, charged with something neither of us wanted to ruin by rushing words. I looked up, caught his gaze, and saw the same unspoken question mirrored back. Then, almost like it happened on its own, he leaned in, and our lips met. Soft, tentative at first, then deeper, like a promise forming without needing to say it out loud. When we pulled apart, the world outside the staff car seemed a little brighter, the train rolling steadily on, carrying us toward whatever came next. I had no idea where this journey would lead. We stayed there for a while, just sitting close, the photo album forgotten on the floor beside the couch. Marco's hand rested lightly on my knee, and I found myself not wanting that contact to end anytime soon. Eventually, the distant announcement over the intercom reminded us that the train was about to depart from the station. Marco stood up, brushing off his pants like it was nothing, but I could see the subtle nervousness in his eyes. "I should get back to work," he said. "You know, before they start wondering where I disappeared to." I laughed softly, standing as well. "Yeah, can't have you late for luggage duty." He grinned, then surprised me by stepping in close again. "So, are you going to stay on this train with me a while longer? Or was that just a one-time thing?" I hesitated, feeling my heart slam against my ribs. Honestly, I'm not ready to go back to the old grind just yet. This trip, it feels like something more. Like maybe I needed to get lost to find something real. He nodded, eyes searching mine. Good answer. Then, with a half-serious tone, he added, "Because I'm not great at long distance." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the train's heating. Neither am I. From that point, our days started to intertwine more naturally. I found excuses to visit the staff car, under the guise of asking about train schedules or just wanting to hear stories about his travels. But really, it was just a way to be near him, to soak in the parts of his world that felt so different from mine, yet oddly familiar. One afternoon, as the train rolled through a stretch of countryside dotted with wildflowers and lazy rivers, Marco and I found ourselves sitting outside on the rear platform, the wind tugging at our hair, the sunlight fading into something softer. "Ever think about what comes after this ride?" I asked him, breaking the comfortable silence. He looked out at the horizon, then back at me. "All the time. Honestly, I'm scared it's going to be a pretty ordinary life. I love the freedom of the rails, the unpredictability. But it's lonely. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just running away." His honesty caught me off guard. I reached out, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. "Maybe you don't have to choose between freedom and connection. Maybe it's about finding someone who wants to ride along, with all the bumps and turns." He smiled, a little bittersweet. That sounds like something I'd want. If you're still riding this train with me, maybe we can figure it out together. There was a sincerity in his words that made my chest ache in the best possible way. I nodded, unable to find words that felt big enough. The next day, during a particularly long stop in a quaint town, Marco invited me to explore with him. We wandered cobblestone streets, stumbled upon a small cafe tucked away from the tourist spots, and shared a slice of apple pie that was almost too sweet to be believable. We talked about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, favorite movies, fears, dreams. At one point, as we sat on a bench overlooking a small fountain, I caught his hand in mine. It felt natural, inevitable. His fingers curled around mine, grounding me. I don't want this to be just a fling, I admitted quietly. I want to know if what we have can be more. He looked into my eyes, his own deep and steady. Me too. I'm done hiding who I am. But more than that, I want to build something real. Even if that means taking a risk. That afternoon was a turning point. For the first time in a long while, I felt hope. Not the fragile kind, but the kind that settles deep in your bones. Back on the train, the work resumed as usual. Marco's world was demanding and fast-paced. The luggage porters had tight schedules, endless tasks, and no time for distractions. But somehow, we carved out moments that were ours. Quiet conversations in the staff car, stolen kisses in hidden corners, laughing under dimmed lights when no one else was watching. One evening, after a long day, he found me in the observation car, staring out into the night, the stars scattered above us like a secret only we shared. "You look like you're thinking about something serious," he said softly, slipping his arm around my shoulders. "I am," I admitted. "About what comes next, about us." He pulled me closer. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out, one stop at a time." And just like that, the fear that had been knotting my stomach started to loosen. Because maybe, just maybe, the journey wasn't about the destination at all. Maybe it was about the people you met along the way and the courage to hold on to them when the train stopped moving. We settled into a kind of rhythm after that night on the observation deck, like two parts of a puzzle clicking into place. Days blurred together in the best way, Marco's hands busy with luggage, mine with a book, or just wandering the train but always finding that thread that connected us. It was subtle stuff, little moments that made the whole trip feel like it was ours. One afternoon, the train was slowing down near a small mountain town where we had a longer stop. The sun was warm and golden, the kind of light that makes everything look softer, more inviting. Marco was finishing up unloading bags when I found him standing near the platform, glancing out as if waiting for someone. "Hey," I said, walking over. He turned and smiled, that familiar grin that made my heart skip. "Hey," he replied, running a hand through his hair like he was about to say something but wasn't sure how. I leaned against the railing beside him. "You okay?" he hesitated. "Yeah, just... sometimes I think about what my life would be like if I'd taken a different path. If I hadn't ended up on this train, that caught me off guard." "Like what?" He looked down at his hands. "Maybe going to college, settling down somewhere, a steady job that wasn't always changing cities every few months." I nodded, understanding that restless craving for a different life. "Do you regret it?" He shook his head slowly. "No, not really. I love the freedom, the unpredictability. But sometimes it gets lonely." I reached out and took his hand. "You're not alone anymore." His eyes met mine, and there was a vulnerability there that made me want to hold onto him even tighter. "Thanks," he whispered. We stood there for a few minutes, just holding each other's hands and watching the world move around us. The sound of the train's horn blared, signaling it was time to board. Back inside, the energy shifted. That night, in the staff car, Marco was quieter than usual, his smile a little more reserved. I asked if something was wrong, but he just shook his head. "I'm fine," he said, but I could tell that wasn't the whole truth. Later, as we sat on the couch, the quiet between us grew heavy. "Marco," I said softly, "you can tell me anything." He took a deep breath, then finally looked at me. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." My stomach tightened. "What?" "I've been offered a position on another train. A newer route, more money, better hours, but it leaves in a week. I blinked. A wave of emotions crashed over me. Surprise, hope, fading, fear. Are you gonna take it? He looked away, struggling. I don't know. Part of me wants stability, a better future. But part of me wants to stay. Here, with you. The words hung between us, heavy and fragile. I reached out and cupped his face, searching his eyes. Whatever you decide, I want it to be for you, but... I want us to figure this out together. His gaze softened. I was scared you'd want me to leave. I shook my head. No, I want you here, but I don't want you to give up your dreams for me. He chuckled softly. Maybe we can find a way to do both. That night, we talked for hours, sharing fears and hopes, weaving a fragile plan around the uncertainty of his decision. The train rolled on into the night, carrying us forward, but for the first time, it felt like we were steering the course together. In the days that followed, everything was tinged with a bittersweet edge. Every stolen kiss, every laugh, every quiet glance was layered with the possibility of goodbye. But instead of pushing me away, Marco pulled me closer, as if imprinting memories to hold on to, no matter what. On the last night before his decision, we sat out on the rear platform under a sky thick with stars. The cool air wrapped around us, and neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Marco broke the silence. I talked to the manager today. I asked if there's any chance to stay here longer, or maybe transfer to a slower route nearby. And he smiled, that hopeful grin that made my heart race. They said they'd consider it. No promises, but it's a start. I squeezed his hand. Whatever happens, I'm here, with you. He leaned his head against my shoulder, and for a moment, the whole world felt like it had paused just for us. The morning came too soon, bringing with it the bright light of reality. Marco disappeared into his duties, and I watched him, trying to memorize every detail. The way his sleeves were rolled up, the confident way he carried those heavy bags, the way he glanced back at me with a smile that said, I'm fighting for this. When the conductor announced the final stop, I stepped off the train with a mix of hope and fear, knowing that whatever came next, this ride had already changed me forever. And as the train pulled away behind me, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected journeys on a luxury train with a luggage porter can lead you exactly where you're meant to be. There was this strange mix of relief and anxiety swirling through me. Relief because, for once, I felt like I'd truly stepped out of the fog that had been hanging over my life, and anxiety because now everything felt uncertain, especially what Marco's decision would be. I had promised to stay in touch, but the truth was, after 3 days off the train, I was already counting down the hours until it would roll back into the station. I was restless, pacing my tiny apartment, replaying every conversation, every smile, every touch. I was caught in this weird in-between space, between the life I thought I knew and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, something different was possible. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Marco. Simple. Can we talk? My heart thumped, and I didn't waste a second before texting back, yes, when? Tomorrow afternoon. Train station cafe? I was there early the next day, nerves jangling but excitement bubbling underneath. The cafe was small and cozy, with mismatched chairs and the smell of strong coffee hanging in the air. When Marco walked in, his eyes found mine immediately, and that grin, the one that could make the whole world feel right, spread across his face. We slid into a corner booth, the hum of other travelers around us fading as we focused on each other. So, he began, I talked to the manager again. She said they're willing to hold off on sending me to that other route for a couple more months. It's not a forever solution, but it's a chance. I reached across the table, taking his hand. That's good, right? He nodded, though there was tension in his jaw. It is, but it also means I have to figure out what I want to do in those next months, and after. I squeezed his hand gently. You don't have to figure it all out right now. We can take it one day at a time. He smiled, but there was something vulnerable there. That's easy to say when you're not the one whose whole life is on hold. I get it, Marco. I really do. But you're not alone. I'm here, and I want to be part of your journey, wherever it goes. He looked at me like I just said something impossible, then like it was exactly what he'd been hoping to hear. The days after that meeting were some of the best we'd had. We explored the town together, laughing over shared meals, stealing moments between his shifts and my wanderings. It was like the world had opened up, and we were discovering it side by side. But even with all the hope, the question of the future loomed over us. One night, as the train coasted through a quiet stretch of countryside, we found ourselves back in the staff car, the space feeling smaller, more intimate in the dim light. Do you ever think about what comes after this? I asked him, voice low. He paused, then nodded slowly. All the time. I want a future, but I don't want to lose the freedom that brought me here. I reached for his hand again, feeling the familiar warmth. Maybe freedom doesn't have to mean running away. Maybe it means choosing what matters and holding on. His eyes searched mine, and I could see the flicker of hope battling with doubt. But what if I'm not enough? He whispered. That question hit me like a punch to the gut. I shook my head firmly. You are more than enough, and I'm not going anywhere. He leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. Thank you for seeing me. Always. That night, as the train rocked gently beneath us, I fell asleep with a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a delicate balance. Marco's job kept him busy, but we made time for each other. Late-night talks, quiet breakfasts, stolen kisses in hidden corners. There was uncertainty, yes, but also a promise growing between us, fragile but real. Then, one evening, as the train pulled into a bustling city for an extended stop, Marco surprised me. Come with me, he said, taking my hand. We slipped away from the crowds and found ourselves on a quiet rooftop overlooking the city lights. The air was cool, and the noise was a distant hum beneath the stars. I've been thinking, he said, voice hesitant but steady, about taking a chance. Not just on the train, but on us. I want to try, really try. My heart raced and I nodded, words catching in my throat. I want that too. He smiled, pulling me into a hug that felt like home. In that moment, with the city sprawling beneath us and the future wide open, I realized that sometimes the best journeys aren't about where you're going, but who you're with. And I was ready to ride this train, into whatever came next, as long as Marco was by my side. The months that followed felt like a slow unfolding, the kind that doesn't happen all at once but in little, steady moments. Marco's transfer to the newer route was postponed again, and instead he settled into a rhythm on the train that felt a little less like running and more like building. We weren't rushing towards some grand declaration or life-changing event. We were just two people figuring out how to be together, day by day, mile by mile. One crisp morning, as dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and blues, we found ourselves back on the rear platform, wrapped in jackets against the morning chill. The train was quiet, only the soft hiss of steam, and the distant call of a conductor breaking the silence. Marco looked at me, his breath visible in the cold air. You know, I used to think this life was just about movement, never staying put, always chasing the next stop. But now, maybe it's about finding something to hold on to. I smiled, reaching for his hand. I'm glad it's me. He squeezed my fingers gently. Me too. It wasn't a grand gesture or a dramatic confession, but somehow it felt right, like a promise whispered in the quiet between two people who'd been searching for exactly this. Later, as the train picked up speed, carrying us forward through the world, I realized that what had started as an escape had become something far more real. With Marco beside me, the uncertainty didn't feel so heavy. The future was still unwritten, but for once, that was okay. Because sometimes the best journeys aren't about the destination. They're about the people you meet along the way, and the courage to take a chance when the train asks if you want to come along. And I did, every single time.